Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 313. I am recording this on September 5th, 2024. This will go live on September 9th, 2024. And I would love it if you're listening in September, because that tells me that you've been keeping up from week to week and you've been listening to each episode. I do hear from quite a few yoga teachers that they listen week to week, and I love to hear what people are doing. So if you're driving home from class or driving to class or walking your dog, these are all the sorts of things that I hear. I just love to know that we're connected in this way. So you could also be watching this on YouTube, because starting with last week's episode 312, I started to record episodes as well. And you can watch them on my YouTube channel, which you can get to right off of my website. Really easy. There's a link right there on the website, barebonesyoga.com, where you can watch the episode, or you can just keep listening. I think the majority of people will just keep listening. And if you enjoy listening to podcasts, and only having it as an ears only experience, you can definitely keep doing it that way, because I'm not going to do anything that requires you see me, but I wanted to simply add this as an extra medium in case people haven't found the podcast on the podcasting platforms. It's another way for me to get the word out and hopefully grow our community of yoga teachers who listen to the show. So if you are watching it, you're going to see me look down at my notes because I have an index card for every single episode that I do. And so that'll just be hopefully not a distraction, but something that I need to do to stay on track. The other thing I wanted to just quickly mention, if you are a listener and you're in the Boston area and you want to start a podcast and you're not sure how to get started, and you're maybe overwhelmed with the idea of coming up with content ideas, I am going to be doing an in-person presentation at a podcasting studio in Boston called the Podcast Garage. And it's going to be on September 26th. 25th. September 25th. And so if you're in the Boston area and you'd like to come to that event, just send me a DM on Instagram and I'll give you the details. I know that most of my listeners are outside of the Boston area, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there. However, there might be some people that are listening that are in the Boston area or in Boston. So I wanted to put that out there. And, again, if you are a yoga teacher, your podcast doesn't even need to be about yoga. Maybe you're a big gardener, or maybe you love horses, or maybe there's something else that your heart desires to share. I always like to say to people, don't not do a podcast because you're afraid it won't take off. I don't do this podcast to try to make it be a million person downloads every week or whatever a huge statistic would be. It would be nice because I'd like to get this out to as many yoga teachers as possible, but that's not why I do it. I share content here as another way to share with you, as another way to hopefully add value to your life and help you grow as a yoga teacher. And if that is a message that I get out and a relationship that I develop with you and a handful of other people, that is fine with me. So, if you can sort of let go of that results-oriented mindset of, oh, if I do a podcast, nobody will listen, and instead just do it because it's so easy to do. And it's a way for you to start to put content out there. I mean, I don't mean to be morbid, but I think about, when I die, this podcast will always be out there on the airwaves. All my videos, all my reels, all the content I've created, the hundreds of articles I've written, it will all continue to live on. And as the internet gets more and more sophisticated and AI starts to bring more and more results to people when they look for answers out there online, my content will live on forever. And so I never started creating it with that legacy aspect in mind. It's just something, though, to keep in mind if that's important to you, or even just to put your stake in the ground. And as a thought leader, as someone contributing to your community, as contributing to the lives of other people in their growth, with yoga, with other aspects of wellness, or again, in any way that you want to. So I didn't actually plan on going down that little rabbit hole, but here we are. I already did. The other thing I wanted to do before we get into the topic for today, and today we're going to be covering how to teach sun salutations. I wanted to start out though by just simply asking you a question, and I want you to just note your gut reaction. So the first question, there's actually two questions, and I'm actually going to just write a note because I want to remember to ask you the other one, which just came to me in this moment. The first question I want to ask you, and I want you to imagine we're sitting in a coffee shop and you've asked to sit down with me because you want to go over a couple of things about your classes and about your life as a yoga teacher. So I want you to imagine we're sitting at a little table in a coffee shop, and I ask you, how are things going with your classes? What would you say? Just a simple question. How are things going with your classes? And I want you to start to think about, we can oftentimes have our mind go in the direction of how many people showed up, how much money I'm making, in other words, how much they pay me to teach. That's typically where people's mind goes because we start to go to the external. I want you to go to the internal because I know this is a paradox, a paradoxical statement. It's so true though, that when you focus on you, at least in regards to this conversation we're having here and many others, but this one for sure, you're going to actually have better results. And in a way, it won't even matter what the results are because you will be so in sync with what you want and how you want to show up. And I think this came up in a couple of different ways in some conversations and coaching calls I had this week with teachers who, out of no fault of their own, are putting their students first above and beyond their own needs. I want you to imagine being the kind of teacher who is so dedicated, and dedicated is not the right word because that makes it seem like an advantage. Let me just take a quick sidebar here. Let me get back on track and then we'll go back to where I'm going to go because I don't want to get too waylaid here for purposes of time. When you think about the answer to the question, how are your classes going? I want you to think about it in terms of how you are feeling rather than what we were just talking about a second ago. How many people are coming? Do people give me good feedback after? All of those things are external and actually in less of your direct control than if you look at how you're feeling, which is in your direct control. And this is where the paradox lies because, of course, for many yoga teachers, they are focused on how many people are coming to my classes. Do I get good feedback after? If I ask people if they liked it, do they say yes? I mean, it's really common for me in coaching calls with teachers for them to almost try to justify what they are doing in class by saying, oh, people said they liked it. And of course, we want people to like our class. However, we can't control how they feel. And I don't believe one of our goals needs to be whether or not people like it. In fact, like I've actually gone to classes where the teacher was really hard, and I don't think I necessarily gelled with the teacher. However, the class was really good, right? So I don't necessarily have to like the yoga teacher to get a lot out of the experience. That's not super common. I mean, you have to sort of be able to separate yourself from the personality part of the person. And of course, you want to like the teacher whose class you're attending. I think the point here, though, is I want you to shift the focus to you. So rather than having your brain go in those directions, I want you to start to explore, how do I feel when I teach? How much worrying do I do? How much stress do I have? How does my physical body feel when I walk in the room? How do I feel in general? Do I feel tired? Do I feel stressed? Do I feel low energy? Do I have tendinitis? Do I have other aches and pains in my body that I can directly tie to what I am doing in class, which probably means you're practicing too much with your class. When your body starts to give you signals and signs of injury, it's signs of overuse. And if you're not training for a marathon, but you're teaching 5 classes a week or less or more, that might be the culprit. So when you hear that question, how are your classes going? What comes up for you? And you can feel free to DM me on Instagram and let me know any revelations you're having about these 2 questions I'm going to ask you. The second question is, how much on a scale of 1 to 10 do you love the sequence you are teaching? And I hope you say a 10, because if it's anything less than a 10, then I'm asking you, my dear friend, why are you teaching that sequence? You know, one of the things I uncovered in the last handful of coaching calls that I did with more than one person, so this is not just a one-person thing, is that teachers don't really like a lot of the sequences that they're offering. They're offering those sequences, though, because they feel they have to, or they feel that's what people want, or they feel like that's what people need. And when I dive a little deeper in these conversations about the where is this information coming from that this is what people need? Oh, that's what I heard. Oh, that's what I observe when I go take class. Oh, that's what so and so does in her classes, and she always has a lot of people. No, we are not operating in this way. And I totally can appreciate that when you press play and listen to my podcast, you probably hear a lot of different things that you don't hear anyplace else. Just like when you watch my reels on Instagram or in my other social media content on TikTok or my lives on IG, or even the emails if you're on my email list. I am not like a lot of yoga teachers. I think very contrary. And so, this idea of I'm doing things because I think people want this particular type of sequence. I want you to see the disconnect there. If it's like wearing a pair of shoes that don't fit you, wearing a pair of jeans that you hate, your sequence is an extension of you. Your sequence is your brand, one of the aspects of your brand. And if you don't think that you're a brand because you're thinking in your head, oh, I just teach 1 class a week. Oh, my yoga teaching isn't a business. I hate to say it, but that's not a correct way to think about it. I want to say it's wrong. It's just not the reality. Every time you step into the studio to teach or wherever you are teaching, if it's a non-studio setting, you are creating a relationship between you and your students. You are standing for something. You are messaging them through what you offer, what you're about. That is brand development. When you buy a can of Coke and drink the Coke, there is a specific taste. There's a specific look to the can. There's a specific, way it feels in your hand. There's a whole vibe to it. When you look at the commercials, and on and on. I don't need to go into brand management right now, but the idea is once you start appreciating that you are in part a brand, and if you don't want to think about it through that marketing lens, just think about it in terms of yourself. You are representing something every time you go in to teach your class. So wouldn't it be amazing if what you're teaching is something that you absolutely love and can stand behind as a reflection of how you want to show up and offer yoga? Think about every time you go into the classroom and you teach a class, it's like you're offering a gift with a beautiful gold wrapping paper on it and a beautiful red bow. It's like you're giving every student in that class a gift, and they unwrap it and there's the yoga practice. You want that gift. I mean, I'm assuming it would be reasonable to guess that you would want that gift to be something you'd want to give them. So enough with the metaphors. What came up for you when you heard that question? Do you love the sequence that you're teaching? And if you don't, well, the answer is right there for you. Create a sequence that you love and make that your signature sequence. When I talk about a signature sequence, that's what I'm referring to, something that becomes your standalone representation of you, that gift you want to give your students, how you want to show up. If you met somebody in Starbucks and they said, hey, what kind of classes do you teach? It would be really easy for you to just describe it in a couple of sentences, and it would feel comfortable. So those are the two questions I wanted to start out with. These are not questions you're going to get from a lot of other people, and certainly not in the frame that I'm presenting it as. And, I don't mean to harp on how I'm different. I am doing it a little bit, though, because I want you to also step into what makes you different. See, there are millions, I don't know, millions, hundreds of thousands of yoga teachers out there in the world. When people come to your classes, wouldn't it be amazing if they felt something different? If they could experience something different, if they could experience something that's not run of the mill, that's not what they expected, that idea of delighting and surprising. And this doesn't mean that you need to go out and jump through all these hoops to come up with something. It means that it's an opportunity for you to really lean into showing up authentically, because in that act of showing up authentically is what makes you different. But for many yoga teachers, it's stepping into the room and trying to be like their mentor, or trying to be like the person that teaches before them who has really busy classes, and they think, well, I need to be like this person. No, you don't need to be like anybody else. The universe is asking you, is giving you an opportunity to show up as yourself. And in your courage to do that, in your willingness to do that, you will naturally stand out from other people, because nobody can teach like you when you have the courage to show up as yourself. And this allows me to transition to one of my favorite subjects, which is getting off the mat and doing the walk and talk. Because believe me, my friend, when you are in downward dog, doing downward dog with them, you look like everybody else. There's not, sure, everybody's down dog looks a little bit different. It's just that when you're doing all this yoga with your students, it's like you're shutting off this whole portal to your authentic way of being, because now you're just falling in line with them. You're just another student in the class doing the practice with them. Imagine if you were walking around and obviously standing on your feet. To be walking around, you need to be standing up. Now you're showing yourself. You're using your arms, your hands as part of, the way you express yourself. You're letting them see your face in certain poses where they're looking towards you. You're able to speak more clearly. You're able to gesticulate, articulate, see them, change your cues in response to what they're doing. This is one of the ways that you can start to stand out, especially, and this is not a hard statistic, however, in my work with yoga teachers and in my conversations with teachers, I'd say 80 to 90% of them are practicing with their classes. So just the mere change for you to do the walk and talk versus the practice with me approach, that alone could distinguish you from other people. So 2 questions to start out with to get us going today. In terms of events and workshops for the month of September, I am going to be doing a workshop on September 10th, and I'm going to be talking about how to do the walk and talk. So if you're out there teaching and you're practicing 50, 60, 70, 80, 100% of the time of the sequence with your class, and you would like to learn how to do the walk and talk as a different way of teaching, and I just went over all the benefits of that approach, send me a DM on Instagram. I'll send you the info for the workshop. It's going to be on September 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. The other thing I should just mention, just in terms of workshops, is please get on my mailing list, because I don't publicize these things as much on my social media pages. The best way to get on my mailing list is just to download the sequence template that's right off my Instagram profile. That'll get you on the list, and then you'll always be getting emails from me with workshop notices. One of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of a light bulb moment, and if you're new to the pod, I share these light bulb moments as aha moments. When I have a coaching call with a yoga teacher and they have this revelation that really propels them forward, I like to share this kind of thing with you. And today's light bulb moment has to do with this idea that, when I work with a yoga teacher, there are certain times when I'm teaching, I'm sharing my method, I'm sharing information, I'm teaching anatomy, I'm teaching as part of my methodology, which covers cueing and sequencing, mindset, and anatomy. And then other times in these coaching calls, I'm coaching a teacher to find a solution to a problem they're having. And because I'm skilled as a coach, I can work with someone, and just through questions, I can help them find the answer themselves rather than giving advice. I don't really like to give advice. I would rather you come up with the answer on your own through guided questions that I ask you, because then it's much more meaningful, and the revelation you come up with will be more long-standing. It will be more sustainable to you. Advice is not really great for people to get. They usually don't follow advice anyway. And that's why advice is different from coaching. And so when I work with a yoga teacher, I am 100% with my professional hat on as a coach. And one of the things that I can see is I can often see when I'm working with the teacher and we're having a conversation about a problem they're having. Let's say the problem they're having is every time I go into my class, my mind goes blank and I forget where I am in the sequence. So that's the problem. Now, almost every single time I hear that problem, I know what the solution is. However, I don't, again, keeping in line with what I just said to you, I don't want to just say, oh, so here's what I think you should do. I would rather, and what's much more helpful for the person is a coaching conversation where they come up with the answer themselves. And I want to share with you today how you can do this for yourself. And it might be a way, if you're willing and curious, that you can think yourself through a problem to a potential solution. So let's take that example of I go into my class and I find that frequently my mind goes blank. And that's a very upsetting situation for me because I get really nervous. I'm losing my way in the sequence. I start to panic, and that actually makes it worse. It makes it harder for me to keep teaching because now I'm super nervous that I'm losing my way. So what we want to do is we want to ask ourselves, what is causing that problem? So what's causing the problem of mind going blank is that the teacher is unfamiliar with the sequence. They don't know it very well. And so right there, we have the answer. Because if we say, okay, let's kind of work backwards. So I'm in my class, my mind goes blank. If I examine why does my mind go blank, I say, well, it's because I don't know the sequence very well. Okay, so what is happening that you don't know the sequence very well? Well, my class is on Tuesday, and on Mondays, I create a new sequence every week for my class. Okay, so what would happen if instead of creating a new sequence every Monday for your class on Tuesday, if for 4 Mondays in a row, you didn't create a new sequence and you simply taught one sequence for the entire month? Now, if you're a longtime listener of my pod, you're probably tired of hearing about this because I talk about this every time. However, it never gets old. It never gets old because every time I talk to teachers, they're changing their sequence all the time. And they're also having mind goes blank syndrome. So I need to keep talking about it. I need to keep talking about it because what I just walked you through is a process where you can come up with the answer yourself to any problem you have. Where the rubber meets the road, though, is are you actually going to do it? Meaning, are you going to teach the same sequence for a month? Are you willing to experiment with that approach as a way to see if it's possible to prevent, in this case, in this example, mind going blank syndrome, right? It's like I can say every morning when I wake up, I want to have a healthy breakfast to start my day. And if I never actually have a healthy breakfast and instead have a donut, I'm never going to be able to experience what it feels like in my body to have a healthy breakfast. In my head, I can keep saying to myself, I really want to feel energized in the morning by eating healthy food. I really want to feel just the positive effects of putting something healthy in my body, just the mindset that comes with treating my body well. I know that intellectually. If I never actually take the 3D steps in the 3D world to eat a healthy breakfast, then I'm never going to experience any of those things. And this is the same thing with yoga teachers. If you have, in this example, mind going blank, and we just walked through this example and potential solution, and you have the key to the golden gate right in your hands, that all that you would want to experiment with here is just teaching the same thing from week to week to see if that solves it. What would be holding you back from doing that? Okay. And what you're probably going to say is, well, I'm afraid people won't like my class. So then I would say, and what causes you to believe that? Well, I don't know. That's what I hear. That's what I think. That's what I'm guessing. And there is the nugget. It's a guess. It's not a fact. It's a belief. A belief is just something that you say over and over to yourself until it eventually becomes in your mind a truth. And until your pain of mind going blank is at a certain level that you absolutely can't tolerate it, you won't experiment in this way I'm describing to you. It has to get to a certain point where you start to take ownership of what you're doing as a teacher. And this goes right back to what we were talking about in the beginning of this episode. When you have the courage and the confidence and the feeling of empowerment at a level that's high enough that you start to say, you know what? Why am I pandering to this false belief about people getting bored? And as a result, putting myself in a situation where my mind's going blank every week out of an assumption that people aren't going, why am I doing this for some false imaginary person that might get bored? This imaginary person that might get bored is causing me to create a new sequence every week and go into class and have this awful experience of my mind going blank, all for something that is just a fake story. And I'm being emphatic about this with you because it is such a common conversation I have. And so I want to be really forceful with you in just being super crystal clear about how the mind just goes in these directions to justify what really seems absurd. And the reason, additionally, that it's challenging for yoga teachers and maybe you is because it's prevalent. So many people are talking about this. You know, a lot of yoga teachers that talk to me, this is the logic. So I'm sure you're hearing it too. This is why it partly takes courage. And it really takes you saying, I'm worth it. I love myself enough to put myself first. And I appreciate that in doing that, I'm going to be able to help my students more. So that's part of this mindset minute conversation I wanted, or light bulb moment I wanted to have with you, because when you take yourself through that process of evaluating the problem you're having and looking for kind of the hidden belief behind it, you'll have a light bulb moment where you realize, oh my God, the answer to my problem is right there. Like in this case, all I got to do is teach the same damn class for the next 4 weeks, and therein might be the answer to my problem. Now I don't have any more. By the end of the 4 weeks, I could have 50% less of mind going blank syndrome. And wouldn't that feel great? So that I hope for that light bulb moment for you. And, if you want some help with that, just send me a DM on Instagram and let me know. A related conversation or a related piece I wanted to share with you before we get to the topic of teaching Sun Salutations is I want you to create a power mantra. I really could call it an empowerment mantra. I'm going to call it a power mantra though, because I really want it to be something that makes you feel powerful. So make sure you have one of those, something that you're saying before you go into every class that puts you in the right frame of mind, that helps you feel strong, that helps you feel confident, that helps you feel qualified, that helps you, like it's built in that you're going to be of service. It's built in that you're there to help people. Like all those things in the altruistic bucket, we don't need to keep feeding all that stuff. It's already baked into you walking into the room and teaching people. What I believe we actually need to do more of is we need to build up yoga teachers' belief in themselves. Like I say we need more of that, and actually less of what really is a lot of this people-pleasing behaviors that yoga teachers have that's wrapped in this kind of false packaging of being of service. Like it is obvious we are being of service. Nobody is going to be teaching yoga if there isn't a huge part of them that loves being of service to other people. What we actually need though is more of teachers stepping into their power, being a teacher, not a repeater, being a teacher, not a follower, being a teacher and a thought leader, being a teacher and being comfortable with people not liking your class, people leaving your class early. Not saying that if they left your class early, that would be about you. Most of the time, it's not about you. It's about them. It's just this idea of putting you in a position where you feel so confident and you're teaching yoga out of your love for teaching it and your love of sharing it with people, not because you're looking for a certain reaction for them or you want them to like you or you want to please them, any of that. So if you think about that and you think about you as a person and you think about your answer to the earlier question I asked you about how are your classes going, think about maybe some problems that you're having, what could be something that you could say to yourself before every class that would put you into that frame of mind? Another example I can give you is, I don't know if you've ever heard, and I've probably talked about this before on the podcast, but Beyonce had I don't know if she still does, but she had an alter ego called Sasha Fierce. And she was on Oprah many years ago, and she talked about before she went on stage, she would embody this Sasha Fierce persona. And it was her alter ego. And she had this little process where she apparently would embody this alter ego and then she would go on stage. So think about it like that. What would be the qualities of this alter ego person? For a while there, I had an alter ego and I named her Valentina Spark because Valentina is my favorite female name, Italian. I'm Italian. If I ever had a daughter, I would call her Valentina. And Spark, I thought was a cool last name. So for a while there, I was playing around with that alter ego. So it's just a fun way to start to think about kind of putting on this alter ego and what qualities does that person have that you wish to embody more of? And then thinking of a power mantra that you can say before every class. I was thinking of power mantras as well, because all last week and this week is the US Open tennis tournament. And I've been noticing a lot as I've been watching, and I've been super dedicated. I've watched every single match, even till late in the night. As I've been watching the athletes, both men and women, you can see them when they sit on the sidelines between points or between games and between sets, you can see their mouths moving. They are talking to themselves. They are talking to themselves, and I don't know exactly what they're saying. I don't read lips, but I'd be willing to bet they're reciting power mantra phrases. You can do this. Stay in your legs. Stay focused. Don't worry about what's happening. Whatever they're saying. When I trained for marathons, I had a lot of power mantras. One of them was the power's in the legs. And when I was on my 20-mile runs and I would get to mile 18, I'd be like, power's in the leg, power's in the legs, power's in the legs. So just an idea there for you. Okay, so for this quick lesson here we'll do, and we'll be wrapping this up in the next 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes or so. I want to just talk about sun salutations, because a lot of times people will say to me, I don't want to teach sun salutations because my students can't do them. I teach older women, they can, and I say no to that. We don't want to gatekeep something as basic as a sun salutation from our students because we're afraid they can't do it. We want to learn how to teach it, learn the anatomy behind it, so we can go in there and offer it, watch our students because we're doing the walk and talk, and help them access it in a way that meets them where they're at. So when we think about sun salutations, you're thinking about high push-up, low push-up, up dog, down dog, and then for Sun B, the warrior one. So think about teaching sun salutations 100% from action, not necessarily getting into anatomy, alignment, or somatics. If you head into it, because it's a pretty complicated movement, so if you head into it with action cues only in mind, that will really help simplify things for students. And this is especially true for beginners. However, you need to understand the anatomy, because there is anatomy behind it that's really important. So I've talked about this before on other episodes. I wanted to talk about it again, especially because in September, you're going to have a lot of beginners in your classes. You're going to have a lot of returning students from summer vacation. So it's good to regroup on the essentials. And sun salutations are definitely just an essential part of many, many yoga classes. Let's just kind of chunk it out. When you think about downward facing dog, I want you to think about this primary action of having them press away from the mat. This pressing away from the mat, now I want you to think about what action is that anatomically. That's shoulder flexion. Shoulders are in flexion in downward dog. And so when you think, what is the primary muscle of shoulder flexion? Well, you could make a case for pectoralis minor and pectoralis major. So see how I did that there? I looked at the pose, I looked at one of the primary actions, and then I identified the muscles in action. This is why it's so important that you understand anatomy, because even if you're not speaking to it in your cues using muscle names and joint action, knowing those things will inform the action cue that you share. So now that I know that, I can say press away from the mat. Press away from the mat in downward facing dog is one of the best cues you can give, because if they're not pressing away, what are they doing? They're sinking down. And if they're sinking down, they're going to complain of wrist pain. So that's a takeaway for downward dog. For plank and low plank, one of the things you want to keep in mind, there is a pressing away aspect. I want you to keep in mind, though, in plank and low plank, the contribution of the core and the legs. So with respect to the core, think about the transversus abdominis, which runs around the center of the body. That's the hugging in, hugging the sides of the waist in. And think about the legs. The knees are in extension in plank and low plank. So that's the contribution of the quadriceps. So press back through the heels. And the other piece for plank and low plank, especially plank, it'll be easier for them to access it in plank, is a little bit of rounding of the upper back, which is scapular protraction, which is the action of the serratus anterior. So now you've got, multiple pieces here in terms of the poses in Sun Salutations. We've talked a little bit about the muscular actions of the muscles in these poses. And then the other two poses, upward dog and warrior one. So in upward dog, primary action here is the back bend. So that's spinal extension. Primary muscle of spinal extension is erector spinae. These are the muscles that line the spine on either side of the spine. And so there we could talk about press the chest forward, press the heart forward. We could talk about squeezing around the seat, which speaks to the action of the gluteus maximus, because the hips are in extension when the spine's in extension. And then if we go to warrior one, you could make a case. It's a little hard to think of a primary action warrior one, but definitely rooting into the feet, reaching up to the sky. I mean, energetically, that speaks to primary actions. The reaching up to the sky is an interesting one, though, because yes, the shoulders are in flexion there. What's interesting, though, is when you watch your students in warrior one and you see people with bent arms, it's most likely not because their pecs are weak. It might be because their latissimus dorsi is tight. Because when the arms are up in the air, the lats are lengthening because the lats are a shoulder extensor muscle. So you could make a case for like modifications in warrior one, have them bring the hands to the heart center, have them reach the arms out in front of them, maybe keep bent arms. And then the other piece of warrior one, there's so many different pieces you could focus on, but one of the common ones is because it's a lunge, they need to have good flexibility in the hip flexor on the straight leg side. So just watch for how far back that back foot is. If it's too far back and their hip flexor is tight, they might lean forward. So putting it all together, think about just really clear action cues. So could be something like if you bring them up to the top of the mat, reach the arms up, bend the knees and fold forward, lift halfway up, step into plank. Hands down on the mat, step the feet back. In your plank, press into the ground and round the upper back just slightly. And then coming forward, lower halfway, elbows in. So that's the low push-up, right? Coming into upward facing dog, press the chest forward and then roll back, hips to the sky, downward facing dog. And downward facing dog, press away from the mat. Take a couple breaths in, walk your feet forward, sweep up to the sky, bring the hands to the heart center. Inhale, reach the arms up. Exhale, forward fold. Bend the knees a little bit, lift halfway, hands on the mat, step the feet back. Hold your plank here. Hug the sides of the waist in, press back through the heels. Come forward and lower, elbows in. Straighten the arms for upward dog. Point the toes, press into the tops of the hands and the tops of the feet. And then draw the belly button in, roll back into downward facing dog. Now press away from the mat. Press away from the mat, pull the belly button in, press the thigh bones back. Walk the feet forward, sweep the arms up, keep the arms up, bend the knees coming into chair. Bring the feet together, the legs together, drop the hips low, right? So there's your chair pose, and then forward fold. So now we're back to the same thing. The lift halfway up, high to low push up, you get them there. Then from downward dog, step the right foot forward, drop the back heel, reach the arms up, warrior one. Now squeeze the back thigh, reach the arms up, take a breath in, right? So now you get it. So now you're gonna, so that was just a little demo. These are action cues, really only, action cues only. And I want you to notice it's just really short phrases. This is not conversational cueing where you're having more of a conversation with them. This is just action cues. Okay. 2 more things. Number 1, if you haven't downloaded my ebook that I wrote over the summer, it's an ebook with the 4 pillars of teaching explained: cueing, sequencing, anatomy, and mindset. Definitely grab that. It's the Bare Bones Yoga Guide to Incredible Yoga Teaching. You can get it by going to my Instagram profile, and it's right there for you to download. It is a wonderful guide. I pulled together all of my best strategies and solutions. I just wrote it about a month and a half ago, so it's fresh, brand new, right up there for you to download. And then the next thing is, here we are in the month of September. It's back to school, back to teaching, bigger classes, more beginners, returning students. So it's really important that you be on your game. So if you're listening in the month of September and you're interested and you're ready, it's not really interested, you're ready. You are teaching weekly paid classes, you're done with your 200-hour teacher training, and you are ready to just pull it all together to transform into an empowered, confident yoga teacher, better cueing, better sequencing, truly understanding anatomy. And you're listening to this in the month of September, and you're ready for that. You're ready to make that transition. Send me a DM on Instagram and use the phrase September Accelerator. September Accelerator. And what I will tell you about is how, during the month of September, I will offer you an incentive to work with me inside my program. And in 30 days, we will get you right on track. You'll be on that track to transformation. Thank you so much for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. And I will talk to you on the next episode of Conversations for Yoga Teachers. Namaste.